Lucas Thomason reporting from the White House. Lucas, thank you. Joining us now, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky. Dr. Walensky, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. Good morning.
Good morning, Brett. Good to be with you.
We just heard about the U.S. Supreme Court currently deciding the fate of the president's vaccine mandates. In the questioning, Justice Sonia Sotomayor made this statement.
We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators.
Now, we can find from Friday suggests there are fewer than 3,500 current pediatric hospitalizations from COVID-19. Is that true?
Yeah, but here's what I can tell you about our pediatric hospitalizations now. First of all, the vast majority of children who are in the hospital are unvaccinated. And for those children who are not eligible for vaccination, we do know that they are most likely to get sick with COVID if their family members aren't vaccinated. So the most important thing we can do for those children to keep them out of the hospital is to vaccinate them and to vaccinate their family members around them.
Understood, but the number's not 100,000. It's roughly 3,500. In hospitals now.
Yes, there are, and in fact, what I will say is, while pediatric hospitalizations are rising, they're still about 15-fold less than hospitalizations of our older age demographics.
Do you have a number of children on ventilators?
I do not have that off the top of my head, but what I can say is I don't believe there are any in many of these hospitals who are vaccinated. So really, the highest risk of being on a ventilator if you're a child is if you're unvaccinated. We also have recent data out just this week that's demonstrated that dangerous MIS-C syndrome that we're seeing in children, 91% protection if you've been vaccinated.
The risk of death or serious illness in children is still very small, right?
Comparatively, the risk of death is small, but of course, children aren't supposed to die. So, if we have a child who is sick with COVID-19, we want to make sure that we want to protect them, of course.
Right, but I'm talking from your data, ages 15 to 24, for example, the risk of death is at 0.001%. I guess what I'm getting at in this opening is that the Supreme Court is in the process of dealing with this big issue about mandates. And do you feel a responsibility as a CDC director to correct a very big mischaracterization by one of the Supreme Court justices?
Yeah, here's what I'll tell you. I'll tell you that right now, if you're unvaccinated, you're 17 times more likely to be in the hospital and 20 times more likely to die than if you're boosted. And so what my responsibility is to provide guidance and recommendations to protect the American people. Those recommendations strongly recommend vaccination for our children above the age of 5 and boosting for everyone above the age of 18 if they're eligible.
Speaking of statistics, it seems to make a big difference if a person in the hospital is in the hospital for COVID-19 or with COVID-19. It's been almost a year since you've been running the agency. Do we have that split on numbers?
What I will say is it differs by each variant. So some variants, first of all, we're doing screening of in many hospitals of everybody who's walking in the door. What we're seeing with the Omicron variant is that it tends to be milder person by person, but given how large the numbers are, that we're seeing more and more cases come into the hospital. In some hospitals that we've talked to, up to 40% of the patients who are coming in with COVID are coming in not because they're sick with COVID, but because they're coming in with something else and have had COVID or the Omicron variant detected.
Right, but I guess, do you know how many of the 836,000 deaths in the U.S. linked to COVID are from COVID, or how many are with COVID, but they had other comorbidities? Do you have that breakdown?
Yes, of course. With Omicron, we're following that very carefully. Our death registry, of course, takes a few weeks to collect. And of course, Omicron has just been with us for a few weeks, but those data will be forthcoming.
But the questioning in the Supreme Court also said that Omicron was as deadly as Delta. That is not true, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Omicron is not as deadly as Delta, at least by your data right now, right?
We are starting to see data from other countries that indicate on a person-by-person basis it may not be. However, given the volume of cases that we're seeing with Omicron, we very well may see death rates rise dramatically.
Okay, back to the mandates for a second. People are losing their jobs. More than 220 Marines, sailors, airmen have been kicked out of the military for refusing to get vaccinated. Healthy service members, some of them have circulating antibodies in their blood from past infections, but they're not the antibodies the government recognizes. Is that fair?
I think the thing that's most disruptive to any business or industry is to have half their workforce out because they're sick with COVID. We have seen with the Omicron variant that prior protection protects you less well than it had with the current than it had with prior variants. So having previous infection seems to not protect you as well as against Omicron. Right now, I think the most important thing to do is to protect Americans. We do that by getting them vaccinated and getting them boosted.
Yeah, and I know that's the message, but the Omicron variant is infecting the vaccinated. And the vaccinated are transmitting the virus, correct?
That is true. It's infecting them at a lower rate, and importantly, those people who are vaccinated and infected with Omicron are not the ones who are ending up very sick in the hospital. Those are the people who are unvaccinated.
Right, but will the CDC take natural immunity seriously to study its effect on the big picture? For example, why not include recovery from infection as the equivalent of at least one shot, the way other countries do?
We have taken this very seriously. Several months ago, we provided a scientific brief with dozens of studies, providing the updated science with this. Of course, that science is ever evolving, as has this variant, and so we need to update that science with regard to what we learn about Omicron, which so far has demonstrated that prior infection protects you less well.
As recently as this past week, President Biden called this a pandemic of the unvaccinated. According to your CDC data, the Omicron variant accounts for 95.4% of cases. Delta is 4.6% of cases. Again, the vaccinated are getting this infection. They're transmitting it to others. Considering all of that and these percentages, how is it that pandemic of the unvaccinated is the terminology that should be used?
We do know that people who are vaccinated are still protected about 70% against infection, especially if they're boosted. So the people who are ending up in the hospital, the people who are ending up very sick with Omicron are the ones who are unvaccinated.
Dr. Walensky, you mentioned the confusion about the guidance and over the past year. The most recent example, obviously, is on isolation and testing, but other guidance is the mask wearing, educators being vaccinated before returning to the classroom. Before you took this job officially, you emphasized that one of your primary goals was to restore public trust. But in this time, do you think that it's fair to say that the trust and confidence of the public has gone down with the CDC?
Thank you, Brett. This is hard. We have ever-evolving science with an ever-evolving variant, and my job is to provide updated guidance in the context of rapidly rising cases. And that is what we've done, and I'm here to explain it to the American people, and I'm committed to continuing to do so and to continuing to improve.
And we appreciate you coming on. We really do. Just getting facts out there. I do want to read this quote from this piece looking at how universities are handling this. At Georgetown University, fully vaccinated students are randomly tested for COVID every week using a PCR test which can detect tiny amounts of dead virus. Asymptomatic students who test positive are ordered to a room in a designated building where they spend 10 days in confinement. Food is dropped off once a day at the door. Now, Georgetown is still using a 10-day quarantine. What do you say to the major companies and universities who are ignoring your new guidance and sticking to the 10 days isolation or quarantine for asymptomatic people?
Yeah, this is really important, and what I would say is that guidance that we've put out is for the general public. I'm committed to wanting to keep schools open and to want to keep universities open. Many of these universities have kids living in multi-person rooms, so they're going to have to adapt our guidance for the safety of their congregate settings.
Right, but sticking in a room for 10 days, doesn't that sound extreme to you?
That is what our guidance was before. If a student were to go, and our updated guidance actually says you can leave isolation after 5 days if you can wear your mask all the time, including being able to eat meals alone so that you are not infecting others while you eat. That may need to be what's happening in these congregate settings.
Okay, so you would send that message to Georgetown, other universities, other companies that are at 10 days?
No, what I would say is if you're in a congregate setting, you have to adapt our guidance for that congregate setting. These guidances were meant for the general public.
Okay. We had a lot of viewers tweet in about your appearance this morning. Erica tweets, please ask Dr. Walensky, where are the treatments for COVID? Why are they not promoting them more? What is the delay with the new pills that were authorized?
Yeah, really important question. We now have numerous treatments that we can use against Omicron, including our monoclonal antibodies, both for treatment and prevention. 2 new antivirals, one from Pfizer, one from Merck. So many opportunities now, remdesivir, to be able to be used in an outpatient basis with 3 daily infusions. All of those are now being distributed. Many of those are harder to make and take some time to make, but the administration is rapidly scaling up what they are able to purchase and get out to the American people.
Last thing, mentioning schools, the situation in Chicago, they still haven't found a solution with the teachers union there, and it'll be closed for a 4th day, Monday. And they're not alone. Burbio, which tracks school closures, has found more than 5,000 schools are currently closed for in-person instruction due to COVID. There's been a lot of money given to school districts and states across the country after the COVID relief bill. What do you tell them, these school districts?
Yeah, really importantly, I want to remind people that in the fall of this year, we had a Delta surge, and we were able to safely keep our children in school before we had pediatric vaccination. Fast forward to now, we have pediatric vaccination. Of course, every jurisdiction is going to have to make these decisions locally, but what I will say is the most important thing we can do is get our children vaccinated, get our teachers vaccinated, get our teenagers vaccinated, and then to practice all of those layered mitigation strategies that have been proven to work. Masking, ventilation, test to stay strategies have saved hundreds of thousands of person days for kids staying in school. All of those things have been proven to work.
Dr. Walensky, we always appreciate your time. Great to talk with you.
Great to be here. Thanks, Brett.
Up next, we'll